there's this AI virtual world and everything like that that's going to happen. But there really is then going to be the premium of you as a human.
Learning the basics really well and making sure that people understand how to prompt, how to ask good questions, how to, we're moving from prompt engineering now into context engineering. So how to create that context so that they don't have to go in every time and say act as if, because now they've got this agent that can do that piece for them.
What happens if education continues to go at the pace it's at? Like, right, to disrupt education, yes, we can't avoid AI, and we can't just slow down.
When you live in a world where every day something new is changing, at what point does education become irrelevant because we haven't kept up with it? And there are people in the world who are creating new systems of education, and guess who they're not inviting to the table?
You're listening to the Disrupt Education podcast, powered by U Science. Here are your hosts, Peter Hostrawser and Alli Dahl.
Welcome to this week's Disrupt Education podcast. I'm here with Alli Dahl. Alli, how are you?
I am doing good.
Yeah.
The sun is shining. It's a beautiful Monday when we're recording this. It'll come out on a Wednesday, which, I look forward to Wednesdays in a completely different way because of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Like the rhythm of Wednesday morning, it's like a little Christmas present. I get to open up and listen to the podcast. We record it, but it's so interesting when you re-listen to something you're a part of live. You're like, oh, I missed that point. It's such a fascinating thing. And I was thinking about this in particular with this guest this week, because we saw her live. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I didn't get the recording of that. I'm sure I missed stuff. So, this one I'll be able to replay. I'm excited about that.
We didn't get a record. We have to talk to Sandy Adams. Sandy, you got to give us a recording of that. But we first heard our guest speak at the ACTE Career Tech Vision Conference, and it's obviously clear that her perspective on AI career pathways and the future work exactly in the same bold atmosphere as we are here in the Disrupt Education. Joining us today is Rachael Mann. She's the founder of EdFuture, the executive director of the National Council of Local Administrators, or NCLA. Educator, she's a keynote speaker, fellow podcaster. We love our fellow podcasters, and the author of two books that we have here, The Martians in Your Classroom and Pack Your Bags for an AI-Driven Future. Welcome, Rachael.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I love your podcast and was thrilled Alli, I was meeting you for the first time at Vision, and also got to hear the aftermath of your first time meeting together. But Peter, we'd met once before, so great to connect and now to be able to have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know we're very excited because, so it was my first Vision. It was my first CTE conference. It was a total whirlwind. I had an amazing experience, but you kicked it off. That was one of the first sessions that I went to and actually could sit down. It was after meeting Peter for the first time, which is still funny. And just to think about, but I think it's the perfect place to kind of start. We'll dive into who you are and what else you want to what else you do. We just listed a bunch of stuff, but I know there's more. But kind of what do you remember about that keynote opening session at Vision, and just kind of you were talking about AI and predictions for the future. So it was good. It was spicy too. It was bold.
I love bold, and I think that that was my first time doing that particular keynote. Well, actually, the only time doing that keynote, because it was the Work Trends Roundup of 2025, and then predictions for 2026 and beyond. And just seeing how much AI in such a short amount of time is transforming the world around us. Going from an education that's traditionally slow to change to seeing so many people quickly, asking better questions about it. When I first started doing keynotes on specifically only on AI versus on meta trends driving change, with AI being the number one trend. But then really people are like, no, we just want AI. And I would ask audiences to raise their hand if they had tried ChatGPT or knew what generative AI was. And you'd have like one or two people in the crowd. And now you don't even have to ask, because we know that people are experimenting and using the tools. But one of the things that really stood out when I was researching for that presentation is that the future is so nebulous that even the people who are doing the predictions, they're saying that the defining feature is uncertainty and volatility. I have never seen, every year I spend a lot of time in January digging into what's the predictions for this upcoming year, what are the 10-year forecasts, and I have never heard that said. And then even hearing as in a Deloitte report that oh, what was it? That it's virtually impossible to predict the skills that employers and leaders will need even a few years out. No one ever says that. Usually they have
Yeah.
it, they're giving you lists. There's so many lists. And then talking about, it's not even a matter of whether people have the right skill. It's more about, are they going to be able to learn new skills? Now, in education, we always talk about lifelong learning and how important that is, but to see it as a defining feature in being able to learn new ones is going to be like that big thing we're looking at in this future, that and also preparing for multiple futures. I mean,
Mhm.
we live in a world where we tell kids, we ask, what is it that you're going to do for the rest of your life? And that's been a myth for a long time. I've told audiences for years that our kids are going to have multiple jobs. And I think it was 2017, there was a report through the Bureau of Labor that said that kids who are graduating high school that year, so back in 2017, would have over a dozen different jobs by the time they reached their mid 30s. And that wasn't like within one company. That was different jobs altogether. But we're seeing that right now. Gen Zers have an average of 1.1 years in one job versus millennials having 3. And then I believe for my generation, I want to say it's 4, so not that much longer. But compared to boomers, where like you stay at your company for pretty much your whole life. So definitely some huge shifts.
That kind of runs right into, so have you had 4? Where is Rachel from? Like, how did you get into different 4 jobs? Like, what was your path and how did you get to this point of doing research and diving into I mean, first off, Allie, to hear it's impossible to list what's coming. I mean, that's a pause right there. We'll get back to that. But yeah, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so Peter, I fit right in with the Gen Zers. I had more than that many. I had more than 4 jobs just while I was in college. I was a machinist. One of my most interesting jobs in college was working at a machine factory, and I can't remember the name of it. My sister and we were assembling archery equipment. I also worked at a warehouse where I like. The conveyor belts would make me really dizzy, but we're like sorting through packages. It was always just like I have that work. I grew up in West Virginia, and work ethic is just part of your DNA. And so I always had jobs like while I was going to school, and even when I first started teaching, I started out teaching in Northern Virginia. Was a 8th grade home ec teacher, as when they were still calling it home ec.
Mhm.
Then it was quickly turned into family and consumer sciences. But during my first year, they said, "Hey, you're now teaching technology. You're the youngest teacher in the school." They saw some technology things that my sister actually created for me, but they assumed I had created it, and were like, "Yeah, you're the new technology teacher," which really served me well because I didn't know how to say no. I'm like, I guess I have to figure this out. So now I'm teaching CTE, and of course, technology is part of CTE, but teaching those classes as well. But education has been the defining theme throughout my career. I did take some time off to help start a restaurant, and then I decided to go to massage school and started my own business called B2B Massage, doing corporate chair massage, but then always went back to education.
Mhm.
So 2015 is when I started Teach Like TED, which did not last long because I got a cease and desist from TED Talks. Well, lots of fun things that happened across that journey, but that all worked out great too because then I transformed into keeping that name as like the base name, but doing business as, and now it's EdFuture, and I feel like that's the fitting name, and love being able to work with multiple clients and do different types of projects between keynotes, writing, podcasting. It's running in CLA. It's a good fit because my mind works that way. I have to have multiple things going on all the time.
Nice, nice. That's that aptitude, Allie, we're talking about. People who
I know
understand
it
it.
is. She does. You do talk about a little bit of what you just shared at the beginning of
Mhm.
your first book, The Martians in Your Classroom. It's a cool story on how I mean you and then your co-author Stephen or Stefan Sanford. Yeah, that one it's so interesting because it's like it's a few years older than your newest book, which is Pack Your Bags for the AI Driven Future for an AI future. And it's still like as a STEM teacher, as a chemistry teacher, I loved just kind of the thinking about outer space and how I have a tattoo that is about like the atoms in your body and the stars in the sky. Like, I mean, like
Oh,
I resonated with what you're sharing in that and how I don't know, there's something magical about looking up and into space. And so I think that's cool that you tie that in your story and in your work. And it's like, how did your work kind of converge into this CTE, workforce development and emerging tech? Like, right, your story, you've got pieces here, but it's like now, I would call you very like futurist in the education space. So it's like, how did we kind of get there and even going into your like, how that first book then led into your second one.
well, first of all, oh my gosh, I love that you took the time to go through Martians in Your Classroom. That was such a meaningful book. And I'll be honest with you, when Stephen Sanford reached out to me, well, I had actually kind of stalked him a little bit because I was on a Southwest flight and opened up, this was before COVID, and when you actually had those magazines and airplanes, and there was no Wi-Fi. I planned on doing some work while I was on the plane and opened up, flipping through Southwest magazine, and ran across this article about his book, The Gravity Well. And he was talking about how important education is, that in order for us to get to where we need to be as a society, that education has to make these shifts. And so I had created like this little image through my word swag with like his quote, and I tagged him in it when I got off the plane and had internet access again. And we started connecting on social media, and then he reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I want you to write my next book." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm not the right person for that." Like he's like, "Yeah, it's going to be on STEM and connecting space to STEM." And I'm like, this is not like that's not in my wheelhouse. And I was working at the Department of Ed at that time as the helping with a lot of STEM initiatives. Or actually, no, I'd moved from the Department of Ed to working for Arizona K-12 Center, which was part of Northern Arizona University. And so he had seen all these STEM initiatives I was working on. And I'm like, how do I say no to this? This person wants me to write with him. This is someone from NASA that wants me to write with him. And I believe in the importance of incorporating STEM in order to help our, as a nation to have progress and to keep up with other nations. So I'm like, all right, let's do this. And so that was an amazing experience because we met once in person and then wrote together collaboratively using Google Docs, and at that time that was a big deal to not even see each other in person. Like someone asked me how they're like, I bet you spend a lot of time in libraries. This shows how old that book feels now because time is changing faster than it used to. And it hit me. I'm like, no, we didn't go to the library once. In fact, we collaborated across the country. And then our first time seeing each other again was doing a book signing together after the book was released. Our world is much smaller in that we can connect like we're doing right now. We're all in three different states connecting, and we take that for granted sometimes. And I'm going off on a little rabbit trail right now, but those are things that shift, and we take for granted how fast the world is changing. Connecting that with pack your bags for an AI-driven future, getting back to your question. So in between, wrote a couple of children's books and then a couple of CTSO books for ACTE. And then pack your bags for an AI-driven future. I was in 2022, moving from Arizona to now Hershey, Pennsylvania. And it was very surreal seeing this moving truck pull up to my house and thinking through the past month of going through different, what things do you keep? What have you collected over the years? What do you get rid of? What do you need to buy, go shopping for? And I'd heard someone during the pandemic talk about how that's what we need to think about as we move into a post-pandemic era. So that really stuck with me in thinking about how the world's going to look different, with AI. And Alli, I loved your post a few weeks ago about breaking things down. And that would go along with what are the things that don't make it? What are the things that don't come with us into an AI-driven world because they're not important anymore? So there's some things that we know are foundational that we have to carry with us into that next stage, but there's some things that get left behind, and there's a lot of things we have to add in order to be where we need to be for this AI-driven future, both in education, society, and even personally.
What a great analogy. I think as we, age in our lives, we always think about, okay, what can I get rid of? I always look at my closet. I'm like, what haven't I worn in like 2 years or whatever, right? And so here's the big question then. What are the things that you pack? What do we need to pack for education? And what gets left behind, as Jason Van Ness calls them, was the barbecues, right?
Oh, the burning the sacred cows.
The
We're having
sacred
a
cows,
barbecue.
yeah.
A barbecue.
Yeah, well, I just spotlight Jason and he dropped some gems too. But yeah, that makes absolute sense. What do we bring with us to the next level of our next chapter of our education? And of course, that's a big question, but
Yeah, no, and it's a big question, but it's sometimes surprising to people. Like when you think about what really matters are the things that have always mattered to us.
mm,
It's part of who we are, a part of humanity. There's human skills. In education, it might look like soft skills, and we have a ton of different names that we say for
mhm,
that. But soft skills are still those things that are going to matter. Being able to communicate. Communication is so important. Even
mhm,
thinking about being able to use your words, use your voice in order to communicate with AI to get the right response that you need.
mhm,
But then also critical thinking. How do you evaluate? How do you have instinct to know what's true and what's not true? That's going to be a huge one because in a world where anyone, like we've had deep fakes forever, but
yep,
now anyone can easily in seconds create a twin of any of us, or we can create our own twin that can say and do anything that sounds like, looks like
mhm,
us. And, that critical thinking to know in your gut that, hey, this is a little bit off.
mhm,
And the more you spend time using artificial intelligence, the easier it is for you to recognize that something's AI generated. But that's not going to be the case this time next year because the
yeah,
technology is getting so much better so fast.
mhm,
So
Mhm.
really being able to evaluate and question. I was thinking about this game that I co-presented with a gal at FETC a few years ago, and we started out with this little game called Three Things I Know to Be True. And we had everyone in the audience come up with three things that they just knew was true. And then we would question, well, how do you really know that the earth is round? Or how do you really know? And it makes your brain hurt when you really try to think about what's true. And I think that being able to think deeply to where it's not just a superficial thinking, but having kids think deeply to truly get to the bottom of things,
Mm,
that's going to be something critical that comes with us.
mm,
I do think that your packing list it's going to look different for every content area. It's going to look different for different schools. This isn't Common Core era, so Common Core is one that we can leave behind. But that, everything serves a purpose at a certain time. And then there's things that we've just got to be able to say that purpose isn't here anymore.
mm,
Does not need to look the same for every student. It's going to be much more individualized, and it'll be easier to have that differentiation when we have all of these tools that are going to help us. One teacher cannot differentiate for every student in a classroom, but when they have a co-pilot called artificial intelligence, they can.
mm,
And that's a huge game changer.
mhm.
Is a huge game changer. It was interesting again in your pack your bags for an AI driven future. You mentioned, and I was curious, like when AI was kind of becoming the buzzword, and you said that you spoke early on, and few people would kind of like use chat, and now it's, just such common language and Copilot. You can mention any of those AI
Yeah,
LMS.
LLMs. It's a tongue twister.
It's a tongue twister. And like people know them. They're just part of culture and whatnot. But what I found interesting is you said that part of your work it was like studying or staying on top of all of the new tech. And I was like, wow, that's and I bet that was doable 3 years ago. And it was probably really challenging 2 years ago and virtually impossible last year. The explosion of it. And so I was like curious, like if you were from the kind of the beginning with your work, like looking at AI and looking at the tech, what is your perception, right, with where it's going? And I say this because you're talking about like deep fakes and how good it's getting. And I'm guessing you've heard of the Will Smith eating spaghetti as like if you are familiar with this, is like it's like the test to see how good AI is. And I just saw one like 2 weeks ago, and it's really good. Um, like you think it's Will Smith. Like if you weren't told that it wasn't, like it was a deep fake, like I would this whole like discerning and figuring out if something's a deep fake. So I'm just curious, like you've been in the trenches. I haven't even been in the trenches. And so it's like I feel like behind in where it's going. So I'm just curious from your perspective, like keeping up with it and like your approach now and how that's shifted.
Well, first of all, I do want to mention I appreciate that you value that and recognize that, because something that I hear from time to time is that, well, we've already done an AI training. We did an AI training last year. Why are we doing an AI training again? And we've got to make sure that education is in touch with how quickly it's changing, because every single day, there's not a day that goes by that I don't learn something new. And if I close my eyes, I feel like I missed out on so much and that I haven't respected what I'm doing as a professional. It's like, how did you miss that, Rachel? How did you miss that? But but when I was writing that book, I remember hearing one of the CEOs of and I don't remember who it was now, but it was one of the big AI companies. He was on a panel, and he said, I can't even keep up with how fast it's changing. And that made me feel more comfortable with the fact that I was having a hard time keeping up. And even writing the book, I kept trying to add more things because I'm like, oh, this just came out. And talk about frustrating my publisher. He's like, Rachel, stop. He's like, make it as evergreen as possible, but write a new one every year if you have to. We've got to publish this. You've got people who've pre-ordered. We got to publish. But in education, I think that having a few or at least a thought leader that you're following that can give you some updates. So every day I listen to Peter Diamandis while I'm getting ready, and he puts out amazing content. If he doesn't have something new that's just come out, then I look at Matt Wolf, because he is another one that like is constantly giving like what's the latest and greatest. And then there's another one, Jordan. Oh, I just lost his last name. I'll get you his last name. Oh, Jordan Wilson, but he has Everyday AI. So those are three of the big ones. I have other folks that I listen to too, but I know that if I'm listening while I'm driving and while I'm getting ready, that's going to help me, and then I can do my other research in addition to that. But that's one way that that helps me stay on top of it. But the hard thing for teachers is that they have a lot of other things that they have to stay on top of that's going through their mind. They can't just stop to keep up with the AI shift. So I think that having a pulse on maybe like 10, 15 minutes a day using a tool, that's going to help. Especially using the tools is big because that's going to help you to understand what your students can do with it, what's important for you to be able to do with it. And if you're not using it every single day for at least a few minutes, like something you would have gone to Google search for, instead now use even Perplexity AI. A lot of times something I would have done a search for, I now use Perplexity AI. But I think that that's going to help them to get a better understanding of what the tools are capable of, and to see how fast it's changing. They're like, oh, wait, this is a different model than what I was using last week.
It's interesting because one of the things, and by the way, I was like looking on my desktop over here, and I do have a couple of the people like their early stuff. I have JPEGs of them here, so I'm like, they have the old prompts and how to do some different things. And I'm actually looking at a list of AI that half of it's not here anymore. It's a different company or was wrapped into something else. It's kind of funny. I haven't opened this image up in a while, Ellie, but I probably should show it on the podcast. But one of the things that I've done, and I wanted to kind of ask you about this. So we're secondary teachers. I mean, Allie was, and actually she's post-secondary as well, does some college work and tutoring. And I, obviously do a CTE program. And CTE does interweave with this so nicely because you have to be real in a lot of the things we do. There's a lot of experiences. There's a lot of human to human contact. There's different things that occur there. And as a matter of fact, one of the things we just visited, I'll give a shout out to North Central College today in Naperville, and we're talking to their dean in the healthcare, all their healthcare stuff, and we were going through all their things, and they were talking about how AI was now integrated not only into realistic dolls, I guess they call them, that they're in beds and everything. And it was really crazy, but how, a cadaver now actually they can reset, and they've sliced. I know this is kind of gross if you're not into medical, but like they've
No,
sliced
I've done
yeah.
cadaver labs, so I'm like, what?
This is a 3D model basically, and then the students can get in there and then they just reset. They don't have to use an actual cadaver, right? So it's and when they go into a room and do the quick checkup, so they have exact rooms like if you're in any medical facility, they have cameras, and then what took professors 2 to 3 hours to give feedback on is now, because they're utilizing AI with their own feedback, it's cut it down to about a half an hour. And if you have hundreds of students, you're talking about major universities. So one of the things that we're doing is we're learning with students. What are your thoughts on that? Because as you mentioned there before, understanding how students are using it. I've found some interesting things, but yeah, what are your thoughts on like learning with students and how does that look in your world, in the impossible list of things that are coming up in the world?
So, Peter, I love that you're already doing that because that really is the future of education. It's changing so fast that we have to be able to be the facilitators of learning, and both learning with and learning from our students,
Yeah.
and celebrating when they come in and teach us something new. In education, we're used to being the experts, and that can be a big problem. Like if you are a true lifelong, like modeling lifelong learning to your students, then you're going to be showing that, hey, we can learn together, and get excited when they teach you something new, because that's empowering them. And it also is showing them that this is how your life is going to look too, is that you constantly have to reinvent yourself, skill and reskill, learn and relearn. That's what the future truly is. And it's a paradigm shift, but I think it's going to be exciting too, to be able to collaborate and be like, yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Mhm.
I remember my first year teaching, And gosh, this goes way back when I had opted out of anything related to clothing design. Did not, that was like, I liked the art part of creating like the pictures and stuff, but I did not want to like do construction. Student teaching comes, cooperating teachers, like, we're starting a new unit tomorrow. You're teaching sewing. And I'm like, I actually, like, I, like the night before, I'm like trying to, like, because back then we didn't have, like, it wasn't like I could jump on a computer and watch some YouTube videos. So I'm just showing my age, but I went in the next day and told the cooperating teacher that I had decided to go ahead and graduate without the teacher prep piece because that was an additional certificate, and that I felt incompetent and I couldn't do this. And she was like, "Oh, sweetie, you just have to know more than the kids do. You know, here," and she so cute. So it's like each day I would teach myself the night before instead of trying to learn it all at once, this little chunk and watch these little, she'd give me these VHS tapes to take home and watch. And and so this kid, that he was kind of that kid, you know, that kid that that you don't mind when they're absent. That they know that's a terrible thing to say, but he a little bit of a troublemaker.
Hmm.
He's like, "Okay, miss, I broke my needle. Can you fix my sewing machine?" I'm like, "Tell you what, 'cause I hadn't learned that the night before. Like, if you can figure it out and then teach me, I'll give you extra credit."
Yep.
He turned into my best student. He was so proud that he got to teach his teacher something, and that he also got to start teaching the other kids how to change the needle on their sewing machine. This child went from being like, it was unrecognizable, this shift. And that was powerful for me to learn early on in my career. So I would sometimes fake it. I would pretend like I didn't know how to do something, like throughout my teaching career, whether it was through technology, you know, whatever I was teaching at the time. And times where I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I don't know how to do that." And then sometimes they would catch me and they're like, "You really knew that, didn't you?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, okay." But I wanted you to teach me. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, that can be a powerful part of the learning process
Yeah.
and build relationships too.
This episode of the Disrupt Education podcast is brought to you by UScience BrightPath, the next generation platform helping students make personalized decisions as they move from education to career.
If we truly want students prepared for life after high school, we can't rely on outdated, interest-only guidance to navigate a dynamic career future. UScience starts with aptitude discovery, helping students build a deeper understanding of who they are and how they're wired to succeed. From there, students create plans, develop in-demand skills, validate them through industry-recognized certifications, and connect directly with employers.
The result? Intentional pathways with real opportunity.
UScience is the only platform bringing all of this together at scale, which is why we at Disrupt Education Podcast are proud to partner with them.
Learn more at uscience.com/disrupteducation-podcast. Request a demo and let them know you heard about UScience right here. Yeah.
I feel like that's a skill that's not going to go away.
Yeah. You learn so much about AI and actually like AI, like the literacy that goes into it. I think that was one of the biggest aha moments when our students were utilizing it. I just gave them the open, like, create a your entry level position that they're seniors in high school, that you want to, that's your job right out of your next level of education, and create an interview. And a lot of them would just be like, "Oh, well, just AI just told me nice things and everything." And I'm like, "Well, you can tell it to be like a very distinct, hardcore, like HR person." And they didn't really go to the next level. So I learned a lot from that as well. So I don't know, Allie, that's how I learned from these students. They're amazing though.
I mean,
That's awesome.
that's taken to another level, right? And but that's where I go back to, like, we don't know, and the uncertainty and volatility is real, because the shift even in the last 6 months, it has been most interesting to me to see, like, we're on like the exponential part of the AI, like, adoption and whatnot. And I'm not saying that to be like, oh, it's scary. It's just, it's interesting to watch. Like, I mean, I still remember, Peter, the first time you were like, we should talk about AI on the podcast. And this was in 2023. That's 3 years ago now.
Wow.
And now it's just like, it's not, I mean, it's like a hot topic in completely different ways.
Hmm.
Like, right? Um, it was just like teachers were just scared that kids were going to cheat. And like now, yes, that's just like assumed. No, I would like honestly. And it's not, it's like, let's just work with it. How can we, work with AI? There's still obviously that first sentiment, but it's just like the conversation has changed so much.
Hmm.
Um, so with like just kind of misconceptions in education and with AI, like uh we've seen like and I know I've seen conversations about like AI proofing careers. And I don't know if that's really a thing because you're talking about this uncertainty, but there for us, we see a lot of like the hands-on, the human skills, the soft skills, the stuff that like AI really can't do, not for likely the foreseeable future. So and you've said that that's not really like the right framing. So like, why is the idea of like AI proofing careers like misleading or not the right framing?
Yeah, and that's a great question, but I want to point out because you used the word exponential. So exponential versus linear. Our brains are very wired to be linear, and that exponential piece is hard to wrap our minds around. And a quote that I ran across when I was writing Packing Your Bags for an AI Future was Peter Diamandis, or no, actually it was Ray Kurzweil, saying that we're going to see as much change in the next decade as what we've seen in the past century.
Yes.
That's huge. And that's hard. That's like how do you prepare for something? And that goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning, this volatile future. But as far as AI proofing now, and I guess you can look at it two ways. AI proofing in the sense that you're not going to be replaced by AI, but sometimes if people are looking at AI proofing an assignment, AI proofing an assignment can be good in the sense of there's things that we want kids to know, foundational knowledge that I always go back to the example that if I'm on the side of the road and had a car accident, I don't want my EMT to have to look up how to stop the bleed. There's things that you need in construction that you're not going
Hmm.
to be like on a scaffold and now you're going to just ask AI. Like there's things we have to know, foundational knowledge. But then there's things that we're never going to live in a world with AI, without AI. So if someone's using AI proofing in the sense of making sure that a kid can't use AI and that they're not using AI in schools, well, then you're also not protecting students because like AI literacy is so important. And if they can't recognize something that's AI generated, they're going to become either the victim of AI, someone's going to be able to use it against them, or a perpetrator because they're not learning how to use it correctly and in a moral way. Like we want to teach kids how to be the good actors, not the bad actors. And that requires having conversations about AI and making it a part of their world. So again, two different senses of that. So how are we not just saying we're not going to have AI in schools? We don't want them to cheat. How are we going to change our assignments that that if we're allowing kids to use these AI tools, that the assignment gets harder. As the tools get better, the assignments get more complex because
Hmm.
otherwise they're going to finish it in 5 seconds. But yeah, making sure that we're really preparing them for an AI world and that they're the ones that are leading the way. Because what we do with AI now is going to determine what's next. And sometimes students feel like they're helpless, and we need to help them to see how powerful they are. That they're the
Mhm.
ones that are going to choose the next direction. They're going to shape the future. They're going to use AI to either solve problems or create problems, and we want to make sure that they're using it to be the ones that are solving big things and making the world a better place using these tools.
That to me is so important because I feel like we screwed it up with social media. I mean, I remember being in rooms where there were huge arguments about social media in schools, in meetings, and that came up that specific. They're either going to be used by it or they're going to use it. So which
Mhm.
one do we want to do? And unfortunately, a lot of it was just shut down. Let's try to stop that. following a lot of leaders, and I've said this myself, and Allie and I have talked about it, is really, again, we go back to the human, like the premium that is now going to be on the human experience. I believe it's going to happen. I think that, there's this AI virtual world and everything like that that's going to happen. But there really is then going to be the premium of you as a human. And what I really like to do in shift in the CTE world is to have our youth and our communities working together to practice, if you will, or actually practice, not really like actually do good for the community, improve the community, and whether AI comes in that or not. But what 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 kind of things do you think that the human capabilities in making I don't know if I want to say seamless world with AI, but making an AI world that is going to help? What are some of the things that you've seen, especially in education or consult on and or work with leaders on to help them understand, hey, you can do this with AI and your students?
Yeah, so first I want to talk about that human piece, Peter, because
Mhm.
yours is so on point about how there is going to be a premium on human and that people are going to start putting, just like we see locally made, things labeled as locally made, we're going to see things labeled and it's going to be worth more because it's human made. I haven't seen that yet, but I actually take that back. When I go down the street and I go to a farmer's market and I see it, we have a huge Amish population here and they make these beautiful quilts. They're $700. I can go on Amazon and buy a quilt that was made, produced in a factory and not pay that much. But there's that premium on the fact that someone stitched this by hand and it's more expensive, it's higher quality.
Mhm.
And I think that we'll just see more and more of that in an AI world where it's like this artwork was produced by a human. This was made by a welder. They
Mhm.
sculpted this. So I think that that's going to be a big part of our future. As far as like AI and human collaboration, that's happening all the time. Like I will earlier today, I had an AI agent creating for our board retreat, creating the forms, the Google Sheets for the board members to go in and put in their travel information, whatnot. I'm like, hey, create this for me. And then I went over to another browser and I'm working on something else. So,
Mhm.
I'm constantly, and sometimes it doesn't work out that great. I was using AI to I thought I could have it create the event management platform for our September best practices and innovations and CT conference. And I created something beautiful, but then I using Replit and I'm not a coder. This was all natural language. And when I didn't know how to ask the question, it wasn't doing what I needed it to do. I would go over and ask ChatGPT to redo my prompt and write a better prompt, throw it into Replit, and it would suddenly work. It would give me
Mhm.
what I needed.
Mhm.
But when got to the API and the whole like some of the uh, stack features, it's like at that point I'm like, oh yeah, this is not something that that I'm comfortable moving to that next step of attaching NCLA's financials to this. So we have someone else, finishing up those pieces. They actually ended up using it as a prototype. So we're using an event management platform, and now he's finishing up those pieces. So that human and AI collaboration is evident there. In the classroom, one thing that I try to be careful about when I'm working with schools is making sure that I don't go too fast. So
Mhm.
right now, just learning the basics really well and making sure that people understand how to prompt, how to ask it questions, how to, we're moving from prompt engineering now into context engineering. So how to create that context so that they don't have to go in every time and say act as if, because now they've got this agent that can do that piece for them. But for students, gosh, I mean, in CTE, I think that it has to be very much geared towards each program area. So this coming up Friday, I'm doing a full day workshop. Half day, we're working on some of the basics with prompting and context engineering. And then the second half of the day, we have rotations, and the rotation that they'll spend with me is looking at by their professional learning community looking at what AI looks like in the workplace. And when I started creating this, I was pulling out all the examples for them. And then I'm like, wait, what am I doing? They're the professionals. I want them to actually pull that out and even ask ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever tool that they're using to give them labor market statistics and to show how AI is going to be used in that workplace. I'm excited about that for everything that they see and how it creates this paradigm shift of sometimes people thinking that AI is not being used in that career field to seeing that, oh, wow, AI is being used in cosmetology. That's what that augmented reality app is, that's showing what the makeup tone and the new haircut, or even the customer service side of things of how AI can make a business run more efficiently in any of our career clusters.
Yeah.
Oh, it can totally do so much. It's interesting what you said there of like, when you're working with schools, you're trying not to go too fast. I mean, like, I understand from like a working professional point of view, but like your other side, right? You're seeing this AI future. You literally wrote a book about it, right? So it's like, what happens if education continues to go at the pace it's at? Like, right? Like, I feel like this is disrupt education. Like, yes, we can't avoid AI, and we can't just like slow down because it's comfortable. It's like what we've done, right? Like, I'm just like, okay, like, how can we really like break the doors down and be like, okay, people, we're gonna have to speed up a little bit. I don't know if you want to go there, but like professionally, you must feel this like this push and pull, because you're on both sides of the coin.
Allie, you are capturing it so perfectly because I want to give them everything. And there's, according to brain science, like looking at John Medina, he's one of my favorite brain scientists, and I sound like such a nerd saying my favorite brain scientist, but regardless. So John Medina talks about how we can't force feed. Like if you're force feeding, then people aren't going to absorb the information. And I found from survey results that when I'm like trying to go through so many different AI tools in one day, because I want to give them a taste of what it looks like to create a slide deck, what it looks like to create a song using Suno, all these different tools, but they end up they're not, I like to wait until, a couple of weeks or even a month after the PD for them to do a survey and see what they've implemented. And a lot of them weren't implementing anything. They went back to their old way of doing things because I gave them so much that they did nothing. So I found that doing a deeper dive into using a tool, I would rather them start learning some of it and then start asking more questions and realizing, wow, this is transforming things, or their kids coming and asking them questions and they realize they have to wrap their head around it. I think that's going to help. But like you said, when you live in a world where every day something new is changing, at what point does education become irrelevant because we haven't kept up with it? And there are people in the world who are creating new systems of education. And guess who they're not inviting to the table? Educators.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like World Economic Forum is working on all of these different models and they're testing them out. They're creating these pilots. And when you look at who is involved in it, they're not even asking educators for their input. And that says something, and that's scary. Or like when you look at alpha schools, I don't know if you've heard of alpha schools, but they're becoming more popular. They're very, very well funded, so they're able to create, and it's people pay tuition to send their kids there. But they're, creating this model that I could see being super effective in CTE, where they have the 2 hours of curriculum and it's very individualized using some of the really top-notch AI tools. And then in the afternoon, they're doing communication skills, passion projects, and entrepreneurship projects, whatnot. But if educators don't even know the right questions to ask or how to question something that might not be ethical, gosh, okay, let's break down the doors. I'm just going to say it and be super honest about my opinion on this. But I had thought Alpha Schools, this model is so awesome. But I heard a few things in one of their interviews last week that I felt like I had to push back on in my mind, like this isn't okay. So they are using the AI optics to be able to measure the attention and focus of the students
Mm.
as they're working.
Hmm.
And back in 2019, I remember seeing that China was using these headbands that would measure brain activity on kids and thinking, we cannot have this come to the US. That's going way too far. And it would like light up showing the teacher whether or not the kid was focused or not. It would send out these reports to the parents and teachers each night showing how engaged their kids were. And I'm like, that's a little bit too much. But now when we start seeing that coming into the US, and
Mm.
I just feel like we've got to know when to draw a line in the sand. And if your gut says this isn't great, then you've got to do some thinking about and some processing about this. Another thing that I wasn't thrilled about was the conversations that they were having about having kids create their own avatar that could sound like their favorite musician or their favorite, a wrestler, whoever it was, but have this avatar teaching them. And this is in middle school. So
Mm.
anthropomorphism is a big issue when a kid can't distinguish between AI, which sounds and looks and feels human, and they're developing relationships with AI. Well, now you're giving them an avatar that is their favorite character to be their teacher. That's going to make it even more difficult for them to distinguish between AI and especially as it becomes even more and more realistic. I mean, I know Magic School, they have Raina, their instructional coach, who used to also work on the student side and be a chatbot for students. They got rid of the little image. They got rid of Raina altogether for students because they saw through some of the chats that kids were developing relationships with this educational bot, and they did not want that anthropomorphism to occur.
Mm.
So I appreciate that about Magic School. I'm like, kudos to them for making the right decision for students. But, knowing when to push back too. And Allie, I probably just completely lost track of where we are going with that.
Really good. That's like those are the risks.
Hmm.
Like it's both sides. That's exactly what I was trying to get at, is that like there is real risk in adopting AI too fast and
Hmm.
going too slow. So you took it to like a completely another level. I love it. It's
But
amazing.
and going back to that, Allie, if we can't speak to it because we haven't kept up with the technology, we can't push back where we need to push back. So I think it's important, really important for educators to realize that if you want a voice in this future, you gotta stay on top of some of these changes.
Yeah. You don't know what you don't know, and that's the educators now. It used to
Yeah,
just be the
right.
only was the students. And, my co-coordinator, Brett, and I have had conversations. We're actually bringing the gentleman in. He's one of the parents of one of the students, and he is a manager in HR of a tech company. And just 10 minutes of his storytelling of how people are using AI and how he has to find people who aren't really real or capable. It was mind-blowing, how they are using it to get jobs and or act like they know things, and it's a cat and mouse game. It's kind of like war games. I'm going way back, Allie, into the old school, because I'm old here, but like war games, right? Like those where you're having these kind of ethical conversations. And I know I'll bring this up in the recap, but it's the Uncle Buck moment. I don't know if you remember Uncle Buck, but when he goes into the principal's office, John Candy does a great job, and they are yelling about his niece, who's just a child, like maybe in kindergarten or first grade, because she's staring out the window and daydreaming. And when you said that about, the lights going off, that was exactly what I was thinking. So it brings up, and that's something I'm going to challenge our listeners to think about is, what are some things, what are some questions that you need to ask after you're experimenting and having these real conversations with your education community? That brings up a very good point. There's ethics, there's equitable access, there's all these different things that can occur. But isn't that just fun being in the hopefully a safe place of chaos, but just being in the chaos of learning? I find that fascinating. So, as we're wrapping up, one bold message for education, especially for like our AI driven world, what would it be, Rachel?
You know, because you said chaos, I'm going to go with learning is messy and it's
Mhm.
going to get messier, and that we have to embrace the messiness because it's not going to be a matter of teaching the same thing year after year. And I think that really start loving that side of it. Otherwise, you're going to be very frustrated. But I think that if you can start embracing that it's not going to be as structured as it used to be, and that's okay. That's going to make people feel much more comfortable or uncomfortable in a good way
Right.
with what's next in this AI future. It's exciting. And Allie, like you said something earlier about that something about it being scary. It really like I feel a sense of it being very scary and exciting at the same time. There are moments where I'm like, what are we doing? But there's no putting the genie no putting Pandora back in the box. I mean,
Mhm.
this is something that it's not going to slow down. So how do we make sure that again that we're the ones that are shaping the future? The future is here. Let's make sure that we're shaping what's next.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. Love it. Allie, final thoughts. I always like to challenge her. She gets great final thoughts.
What Rachel just said is the essence of skydiving.
Hmm.
It's fear and it's awesomeness. You're excited. You really don't know what's going to come next. Even if you think you do, you can't anticipate it. And I mean, it's like, well, I think why I love that sport so much, and I love experiencing people's first jump, as it really does ground me in teaching people. I know AI is not coming for my job, so that particular job at least. And but it's messy too, right? You're dealing with real people's emotions in very real time, and that I think that's why I mean, like I have no problem embracing AI and like where it's going. I think we need to, as you said, Rachel, we have to consider where it's going and what it means for kids. I like a lot of the message that you have on the podcast and in your books, and yeah, just and if you want to skydive with me, by the time this comes out, hit me up in Wisconsin because it'll be skydiving season.
Allie, I want to add one more thing because you said that AI is not coming for your job. This is the time for CTE. When I hear Jensen Huang, who is the CEO of NVIDIA, talking about how badly they need people going into electrical, they need HVAC, they need plumbers, like everything that we're doing in CTE, this is the time. And then you hear Mike Rowe talking about how these are jobs that are now immediately six figures. I'm like, oh my gosh, how exciting is that? And then it's also for CTE teachers or for CTE leaders. Let me just say, you better do a really good job making sure your teachers love their job because it's going to be even harder to find folks who are going to be willing to leave the profession in order to come in and teach these CT classes that we need so badly great instructors in our CT classes. So CTE is not going to be replaced anytime soon. So embrace the trades, love the trades. It's awesome to be able to work with your hands, and what a great time to be able to be in demand during this building the infrastructure for what's next.
So I feel good now, Allie, because I'm in CTE. So no, I appreciate it. The books are The Martian in your classroom, The Martians in your classroom. It never shows up on my screen, but I'll put it up on the
Shows up on
and pack your
mine.
bags for an AI-driven future. Um, the founder of EdFuture. Rachel, how can people connect with you if they want more? I love the fact that there are one-offs out there and who just like, okay, I'm going to come in and just work on something and leave. But I like how you learn with people. You work in not just one capacity. You constantly build and learn from others. So I think it's important for our listeners to understand how can they reach you.
Thank you, Peter. And if you want to reach me, you can follow me on LinkedIn or social media platforms on at Rachel EDU, and that's RACHAEL edu. Sometimes people forget that extra A in there. Or on my website, edfuture.org. And thank you. This has been fantastic to connect with you guys and have such a fun and meaningful conversation today.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you sharing everything. This entire conversation really just reminds, I think, a lot of our educators that the future of work and education isn't something that people are facing someday. It's happening right now. So thank you so much for hanging out with us today, Rachel, and sharing your expertise.
Thank you so much. Thanks to both of you, Peter and Alli.
Yes, absolutely. For Alli Dahl, I'm Peter Hostrawser. We want to thank you for hanging out with us on the Disrupt Education podcast. We'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in to the Disrupt Education podcast. If this episode sparked an idea, challenged your thinking, or helped you see education differently, well, that's exactly why we're here. We're highlighting real stories and bold ideas shaping the future of learning. A quick thank you to our sponsor, UScience BrightPath, the next generation platform helping students make personalized decisions as they move from education to career. If you're serious about connecting students to real opportunity, head to uscience.com/disrupt education-podcast. Request a demo and let them know you heard about UScience right here on the Disrupt Education podcast. For more episodes and clips and ways to connect, you can always visit disrupteducationpodcast.com. I'm Peter Hostrawser. Keep disrupting. We'll see you next time on the podcast.